Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining us on Velayat News. I'm Abroo Sabzwari, and now a look at the headlines for today. Carnage continues in Iraq as nearly 60 people have been killed in car bombs, suicide blasts, and gun attacks across Iraq. In Pakistan, at least 2 people have been killed in a blast outside a Shia mosque in Kohat. The Syrian army has found a torture room used by al-Nusra Front terrorists in Rif Damashq. The crisis in Syria has put the education of 2.5 million Syrian children in grave danger. In California, a Saudi princess has been charged with human trafficking. U.S. Senator for Michigan Carl Levin calls for military strikes on Syria. Egypt welcomes U.S. remarks on ousted President Mohammed Morsi. The Palestinian Health Ministry says at least 360 patients are in serious risk due to the closure of the Rafah border crossing. And now, the news in detail. Nearly 60 people were killed in bomb and gun attacks across Iraq on Thursday. At least 15 people were killed in a bomb attack on Shia mourners in Baquba, north of the capital city, Baghdad. In the town of Muqdadiyah, 50 miles northeast of the capital, 11 people were killed when a car bomb exploded. As survivors gathered to evacuate the wounded, a suicide bomber blew himself up. In another event, gunmen opened fire on 2 checkpoints guarding oil installations on the road between Beji, 180 kilometers north of the capital, and Haditha, killing a further 11 people. 3 roadside bombs targeted police patrols in the city of Tikrit, killing 3 policemen. Earlier in the day, 7 policemen were killed in attacks in the western province of Anbar, Iraq's Sunni heartland. The violence is part of a sustained campaign of militant attacks since the start of the year that has prompted warnings of wider conflict in a country where ethnic Kurds, Shia, and Sunni Muslims have yet to find a stable power-sharing compromise. Sectarian tensions have been inflamed by the civil war in neighboring Syria, which is quickly spreading into a region-wide proxy war, drawing in Shia and Sunni fighters from Iraq and beyond to fight on opposite sides. In Pakistan, at least 2 people were martyred and 7 injured on Thursday when a bomb exploded outside a Shia mosque in Kohat, a southern city of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. Police officials said the bomb was planted in a motorcycle parked near the Shia mosque, aimed to target Shia worshippers, and a temporary bus stand in Kachapakka area on Kohat's Hangu Road. Kohat District Police Officer Dilaver Bangash told reporters that the explosion was carried out through a remote-controlled device. He added that between 4 to 5 kilograms of explosive material was used in the bomb. The bomb exploded just as Shia worshippers were coming out of the mosque after offering Dhuhr prayers. The injured were shifted to the district headquarters hospital, where officials said the condition of some of the wounded was critical. The powerful explosion also damaged nearby shops. The Syrian army has found a torture room in Rif Damashq used by al-Nusra Front terrorists to hold and torture civilians and abducted army soldiers. Al-A'lam reporter Darin Fadl said on Wednesday that the army is strongly moving forward in purging Rif Damashq from terrorists. Several areas around the shrine of Lady Sayyida Zainab Salamullahi alayha have come under the army's control following heavy clashes which left many terrorists dead or injured. Operations in Rif Damashq are strategically important due to its closeness to the capital Damascus, congested texture of the neighborhoods, and the fact that there are many buildings which are occupied by terrorists who use their residents as human shields to hinder army advancements. In their door-to-door search, Syrian soldiers found a building which was used as a base for al-Nusra terrorists. There were different devices for torture and execution in the building. According to the residents, terrorists used this building to torture civilians and execute army soldiers who were abducted in fights. Armed groups who are fighting in a bloody, massive insurgency against the government in Syria are feared by people across the country, as they tend to bring an area under their control and impose their own version of ruling system. They punish people for not behaving as they desire and hold public executions. There are countless records of executing young children, mass murder of residents, and torturing victims before killing them throughout the country. The conflict in Syria started in March 2011 when pro-reform protests turned into a massive insurgency following the intervention of Western and regional states. The unrest, which took in terrorist groups from across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa, has transpired as one of the bloodiest conflicts in recent history. As the foreign-backed insurgency in Syria continues without an end in sight, the U.S. government has boosted its political and military support to Takfiri extremists. Washington has remained indifferent about warnings by Russia and other world powers about the consequences of arming militant groups. According to the UK-based aid agency Save the Children's report issued on Friday, about 22% of Syrian schools have been destroyed or badly damaged in over 2 years of unrest, jeopardizing the education of 2.5 million children. Over the past year, the Syrian crisis contributed to a dramatic rise in the number of violent incidents affecting children's education worldwide. The agency said that over 70% of 3,600 such incidents in 2012 took place in Syria. It added that the school buildings were bombed, teachers came under violent attacks, and children were recruited by armed groups. The agency stated that the violence destroyed or rendered unusable some 3,900 schools across Syria by January 2013. According to the report, more recent estimates from April show a very rapid increase in this number, with 22% of the country's 22,000 schools rendered unusable. The combined effects of conflict have jeopardized the education of 2.5 million school-aged children and young people. Save the Children executive Jasmine Whitbread said in a statement attached with the report that the classroom should be a place of safety and security, not battlegrounds where children suffer the most appalling crimes. Children who are targeted in this way will be paying the price for the rest of their lives. On June 30th, Syria's local administration minister Omar al-Ibrahim Ghalonji said that the more the 2 years of foreign-sponsored terrorism in the country has damaged about 9,000 state buildings and cost $15 billion in losses to the public sector. Syria has been gripped by deadly unrest since 2011. According to the United Nations, more than 90,000 people have been killed and millions of others displaced in the violence.
يوم رحنا الناس كانت بالأراضي وما في حدا يقدر ينقذها. شعوري انحبط كثير ويأست من حالي ومن الدنيا كلها.
كان يدب أول شيء اسمه كان يفوت علينا دبابات وطيران، كان يدب براميل، كلها يعني رحلت ما ظلش إشي داعي.
عائلتنا تركت سوريا لأنه القصف فوق رؤوسنا. القصف ما تصوري قد ايه. نكون نايمين هيك يعني تعبانين كل النهار ما احنا نايمين، ما تسمع الا صوت القذيفة فوق راسنا.
شايفينهم بعيوننا، عصي هروانات وكهرباء، قتلوهم بلوك، شيلوا عروسهم، اعتقالات، ضرب.
I've heard stories of torture, stories of abuse, of children being hung up on walls and beaten, of children helping to dig out dead bodies. I've just never heard anything like this in my life. Of course, it's impossible to verify these stories. Save the Children doesn't have access into Syria, but I personally have spoken to over 50 people across this camp, and the stories are consistent. Child after child that I've spoken to here in this camp has told me how worried they are about themselves and their family. But more than that, they're terrified for the children that are still in Syria. We have to do something to stop this level of violence. So we're asking the UN to monitor every single human rights violation against children. Unless we know exactly who is responsible and exactly what they've done, we cannot hold them to account.
طيب مين ما يقدر يساعدنا نحن السوريين يساعدونا شو ما يقدروا يساعدونا إذا كانت شغلة صغيرة بتصير كبيرة.
A Saudi princess has been charged with human trafficking for allegedly forcing a Kenyan woman to work at her house against her will. On Wednesday, Michelle Alaban, aged 42, identified as a Saudi princess, was reportedly arrested and charged for keeping a 30-year-old Kenyan woman at her house in the U.S. state of California. According to Orange County District Attorney Tony Rakakis, Alaban was charged with 1 count of human trafficking. She could face up to 12 years in prison if convicted. Alaban was arrested after the Kenyan woman told a passenger on a bus that she was a victim of human trafficking. The passenger then helped the woman contact the police. According to the domestic worker, she was hired in Kenya in 2012. She added that her passport was taken from her after she arrived in Saudi Arabia. The Kenyan woman was forced to work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, while being paid only $220 a month out of the $1,600 monthly agreed upon salary. She was also not allowed to leave the house. A $5 million bail has been set for Alaban. She has also been required to submit to GPS monitoring and is banned from leaving the country without prior authorization. A prominent U.S. senator has called on the administration of President Barack Obama to attack Syrian airfields, airplanes, and massed artillery. The influential chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Carl Levin, who has returned from a fact-finding trip to the Middle East, also expressed support for arming the militant groups fighting against the government of President Bashar al-Assad. Levin stated that increased military pressure on Assad is the only way to achieve a negotiated settlement in Syria, which in turn is needed to restore stability to a region that certainly doesn't need any more instability. Levin conceded that U.S. public opposes an increased involvement in the Syrian conflict and that there is no consensus on the issue on Capitol Hill. Senator Levin and Senator Angus King spent 5 days in Jordan and Turkey talking to government officials as well as U.S. diplomatic and military personnel about the Syrian conflict. The two senators also met with militant leaders including Salim Idris, the leader of the Free Syrian Army FSA, and visited refugee camps along the Syrian border. In a joint statement on Tuesday, Levin and King said the U.S. and its allies should arm and train the militants and consider options for limited targeted strikes at airplanes, helicopters, missiles, tanks, and artillery. A recent opinion poll conducted by the Pew Research Center shows that the majority of Americans, 70%, are against U.S. involvement in Syria's unrest. Egypt's interim rulers welcomed remarks from the U.S. State Department describing the rule of toppled leader Mohamed Morsi as undemocratic. In Cairo, the statement read as a signal that Washington will not cut off its $1.5 billion in annual aid. In a stark illustration of the desperate state of Egypt's economy, a former minister from Morsi's ousted government said Egypt had less than 2 months' supply left of imported wheat, revealing a far worse shortage than previously disclosed. The army's removal of Egypt's first freely elected leader last week after millions took to the streets to protest against him has left the Arab world's most populous country polarized by divisions unseen in its modern history. Washington has been treading a careful line. U.S. law bars aid to countries where a democratic government is removed in a coup. So far, Washington has said it is too early to say whether the Egyptian events meet that description. 2.5 years of political turmoil has left Egypt on the brink of economic collapse, scaring away tourists and investors, shriveling hard currency reserves, and threatening its ability to import food and fuel for its 84 million people. The imported wheat stock figure, previously a closely guarded secret, means Egypt will need to urgently start spending a $12 billion financial aid lifeline it has been given in the past 2 days by Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait, rich Gulf states that welcomed Morsi's downfall. The Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza has warned that the lives of 360 patients who have been prescribed medical treatment in hospitals outside the Gaza Strip are at risk as a result of the closure of the Rafah border crossing. The health ministry appealed to the Egyptian authorities to reopen the Rafah crossing for these patients in order for them to receive medical treatment in Egyptian hospitals. In a press release on Thursday, the ministry stated that 26 cancer patients must receive their regular therapeutic sessions in hospitals outside Gaza, and there are 22 critical cases that need to travel urgently. The ministry noted that 206 patients were unable to travel for medical treatment during the past few days because of the closure of the crossing. During this holy month of Ramadan, we request all of you to please remember the Muslim families and innocent children suffering all across the world today in Pakistan, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Palestine, Turkey, Egypt, and wherever else the Muslim Ummah is facing turmoil and dire circumstances. Please also remember to pray for and support the families of the shuhada who are being brutally tortured and killed. That brings us to the end of our bulletin today. If you'd like to contribute your community's news, you can email us at news@VelayatTV.org. You can also get the latest headlines and more by visiting our website, VelayatTV.org, or subscribe to and follow us on our YouTube and Facebook pages, Velayat TV USA. Many thanks for joining us. Till next time, I'm Abroo Sabzwari. Fi amanillah.